My name is John Passfield, and I'm going to read from my Macbeth novel. This is video 5, Lady Macbeth, her complete duet-duel. The cover of the novel, Lord and Lady Macbeth, Full of Scorpions is My Mind, a novel by John Passfield. Here's the summary, which is printed on the back cover. Lord and Lady Macbeth are being stung not by scorpions, but by imagery, the medium by which human beings think at the deepest levels. And the kingdom which they seek to conquer and control is not just Scotland, but the kingdom of the mind. Imagery enlightens, but also obscures. Imagery is loyal, but it also betrays. Imagery is visible on the surface, but manifests itself at hidden depths. Their mutual struggle to live in prose while thinking in imagery affects the two Macbeths in different ways. So, Lady Macbeth in this video, thinking in imagery, but she's lived a life which she simplified, you could say, into prose by making decisions. Do you kill the king or not kill the king? Pretty simple way to live, but if you can't think that simply, if your mind at the deepest level is aware of all the complexity of killing the king, then it can be very, very hard to kind of keep control of your mind and keep control of your life. So here's an introduction to the duet-duel idea. It's going to be very similar, almost the same as that to video 4. That one being about Macbeth, this one being about Lady Macbeth. But in order to make these videos stand alone, I'll run the risk of repetition. The story of my novel is the same as that of the Shakespeare play, but presents Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in alternating chapters in which they take part in the events of the Macbeth story and respond to those events in deepening imagery, one of which is the duet-duel imagery. In Macbeth-Video 1, the Duet-Duel, I alternated the thoughts of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as they're presented in the novel. In order to keep that video to a reasonable length, I left out some of the passages of that cycle. As I listened to that video, it occurred to me that I should read the complete duet-duel thoughts of each of the characters. So I'm going to make this video, video 5, the complete duet-duel thoughts of Lady Macbeth. I've already recorded video 4, which are the complete duet-duel thoughts of Lord Macbeth. Now, there are 4 duet-duel passages in each chapter. However, if you listen for clues in these passages, you'll realize that the duet-duel takes place during the time that Lady Macbeth is being watched during her sleepwalking episodes and before Macbeth's final battle with the forces of Macduff. Now, a duet is harmony, a duel is disharmony. As you listen, you might ask which is the best description of the relationship between these two people at this stage in their relationship. You might also ask yourself, do they both speak these words to each other out loud? Or does one speak out loud and the other responds silently? Or do they both keep silent while thinking these thoughts about what their relationship has come to be? So it's a state of the relationship assessment, I guess you could say, this cycle of imagery. So here are Lady Macbeth's thoughts, or spoken words, in the duet-duel cycle of the novel. So as I mentioned, the two alternate in the novel, but not in this video. I'm just reading from Lady Macbeth. So we leave out chapter 1, which is Macbeth 1. We go to chapter 2, which is the first Lady Macbeth chapter. There's about 50 or so images in each chapter, about 3,000 words, and these are 4 segments only of this particular imagery. So imagery bounces off, images bounce off other images, images illuminate other images, images even knock each other out of the way if you're thinking of pool or snooker or something. Images compete, compete and cooperate. Let's have a look. Page 10. From the moment that we met, I thought of us as one. In those days, I never thought of us as two. We were as close as any 2 people could possibly be. I had an offer from a miserable little prince from a tiny corner of Scotland, the seeing of a tiny little island, battered by foreign adventurers and waves. I begged my father to refuse consent, and he complied. My sister threw herself away. A handsome prince from a ragtag kingdom. She disappeared in one of the raids. If she is alive, she's probably a waif in a prison cell. Our blood has had one heart since the day we met. Our heads have had one mind in all we have thought. Every action has been the result of our single desire. As a child, I used to love to feed the swans. They mate for life, my mother said as we tossed the crumbs. The two are joined under the surface, I thought to myself. My mother and father were so relieved when I gave them the news. A son-in-law with such regal promise was welcome indeed. You have surpassed every superlative that I presented to them on that day. That walk in the meadow was the day of all my days. The flowers were blooming on the hillside, and the sun was bright. I could barely believe how much we said, with very few words. We both had royal blood in our veins. I was an undervalued princess. My lowly status was an accident of birth. And you were not the first man of the second row. You were Macbeth, with all that entailed. An obligation to take the fort at the top of the hill. I used to watch the women weaving the tapestry. I used to picture you and me woven inside. You and me and our little broken boy. You enchanted me more than any 3 witches. I have no doubt that I enchanted you too. We needed no prediction to enlighten our way. Now the tapestry sits on the loom. The threads dangle down. The weaving women have all gone from the castle. Skipping Macbeth 2, which is in the other video, going on to Lady Macbeth 2. Sometimes I think that your blood flows in me and mine in you. Whose heart pumps the blood is never in question. Those times when we are closest are the times when common blood flows in our veins. At other times, I wonder. At other times, confusion, disarray. Blood battering its head against closed doors. At odds, separate, alone, silently brooding. Thin as water, thick as mud, yours and mine. The old King Malcolm was inhospitable. His negotiations with my father were brutal in the extreme. He made it clear that my father was his footstool. It was Duncan, the old king's grandson, who made welcome for my father, a sumptuous feast from Duncan, a beggar bowl from the king. Duncan was younger then, though he came to resemble my father before he died. Duncan's wife was feeble and helpless. She sat by the fire and sniffled most of the time. I could see that she lacked the attributes of a queen. So I became a lady of the court. The Lady Banquo, the Lady Macduff, the Lady Lennox, the Lady Ross. I felt uneasy when the great ladies gathered in their splendid halls. My mother was ambushed at the crossroads, trampled down like a hollow reed, treated like a maid at the castle door. I knew a girl once who was found at the bottom of a well. No one knew whether she jumped or whether she fell. It was not her task to fetch water in any case. Birth is the miracle of all the miracles that might be. It is the way by which 2 people become one person. It is the way by which 2 people become 3. Our little boy would have been splendid as a prince of the realm. We could have had a little robe fashioned to fit him, and a little crown. We could have, the 3 of us, walked the red carpet during affairs of state. Why are some women blessed with children, while some are not? Do your 3 weird sisters, do you think, in such weighty matters, have any say? I've sometimes wondered what kind of prediction, if I could have chosen the topic, your 3 weird prognosticators might have made concerning me. Skipping Macbeth 3, we go on to Lady Macbeth 3. page 42. I threw myself wholeheartedly into my preparations for future greatness. I said not a word to those other wives of thanes, but I must admit, I fantasized that the girl from the minuscule kingdom would soon be their queen. We were invisible to all but ourselves. We were true to ourselves, but not to our circumstances. We were the royal couple without the crowns and the robes. Death to me would be to shrink as the years go by. Shrinking kingdom, shrinking husband, shrinking self. To disappear, yet still to be alive. I could not believe that you had brought away those daggers. How could you think that this was part of the plan? Standing there covered in blood with those daggers in your hands? I was desperate to stop you talking. I felt that you were fitting us for the noose. It was all I could think of to try to save the day. When Macduff asked, "Wherefore did you so?" he was showing himself in command. He was smearing you with blood, though your gown was clean. I had to squelch Macduff's bid to become the next king. Duncan's wife, Her Majesty the Queen, her cold and draughty castle. We were sitting by the fire, a blanket over her head, a ruddy nose. "My husband is not a warrior," she said. She blew her nose with the royal handkerchief. "But everything he does is for Scotland's good." I had him take old Malcolm's tapestry down. Behind was a cold, stone, draughty wall. I tried to imagine the magnificent pageant with a brilliant array of splendid colors, which was being designed as a chronicle of our reign. The master weaver was a martinet. He worked the weavers very hard, but he was a man who loved the lore of his trade. "A good tapestry will last for centuries," he said, "a record of the deeds that were done in this time. The eyes of yet unborn thousands will marvel at the events which will animate this wall." And now we skip Macbeth 4 and go on to Lady Macbeth 4. Which of the couples did you most admire? The couple Banquo, the couple Macduff, the couple Lennox, the couple Ross? You knew all these couples much longer than did I. Of course, I never knew my mother and father when they were younger. During my childhood, I thought them alike in many ways. Whether they started out that way or grew together, I would be hard-pressed to say. To be alone has always been my greatest fear. To not share my being with another is a fate that I dread. I'm only myself when I'm at one with my Lord. I did not see any reason to eliminate Banquo. If you had thought about it, you would have felt the same. Banquo's issue shall be kings? What could that mean? I looked at the Banquo situation like this. You reign for a good many years, and then our son succeeds his father. Then Banquo's issue, far beyond the natural life of Fleance, of course, comes into its own after an interminable irrelevancy of years. I try to be logical, always logical. I think things through to the end. The witches never said that Fleance would be king. Banquo's wife, Lady Banquo, the mother of a young son, sitting on her horse in the courtyard, looking down at me, waiting for the entourage to assemble. "The only thing I worry about is our son," she said. Her eyes showed great concern. What would become of him if something should happen to us? Well, sleep is the great restorative, the healing agent of all life's sores. You have said so many times yourself. We must change our routine somehow. Less time at court, perhaps. Would it help if we went riding in the afternoons? We could look for that meadow again. Surely it can't be far from the castle. It'd be pleasant to spend some time there again. And then we skip Macbeth 5, which of course is either silent or spoken reply, and go to Lady Macbeth 5. page 74. Sometimes I think that I became you and you became me. So we were still two people rather than simply one, as if our bloods had not commingled at all. I look at you and I look at me and I wonder, what makes us the same? What makes us different? What would a child take from us two? What leave behind? That is why everyone seeks the glimpse of a newborn child. I did not see what you saw at the banquet. I was guessing all the time what it could possibly be. All that I could see the whole time was an empty stool. I was counting on the goodwill of all our new subjects. I had all the cards made up, with everyone in their proper places. I wanted everything to be settled from that night on. I'd never been on a battlefield, but I knew that we must remain calm. I thought that you would be the one to anchor me. The banquet room, our first event as king and queen, long before the time for our festivities to commence. The room was completely empty. It was just myself and the girl. We were setting the place cards at the appropriate places. What do you think of this? I asked. That I leave an empty stool and a place card in memory of Banquo's wife and the mother of his son. Would such a gesture, do you think, be a good idea? Once in a while, some light comes in at the window. There's very little light outside. The darkness makes the days all seem the same. There's such an echo in here. Yet when I call out to the servants, they don't seem to hear. Sometimes I wonder whether all of them are deaf. The room is always so drafty and so cold. The tapestry, which we have ordered to hang on the wall, won't be ready, it seems, for quite some time. Would you consider, my love, moving the thrones, the two of them, of course, to a smaller room? Again, we skip Macbeth 6, which might be his reply, might be his spoken or silent reply, and go to Lady Macbeth 6, page 90. I have always been afraid to offer kindness, how to know whether a dog will bite or will lick my hand. I have lived far away from every person in my life. The making of friendship is a gift which some people have and some do not. With you, my lord, it wasn't a case of making a friendship at all. When I met you, it was as if I was meeting myself. The closest I came to what I take to be friendship was with Lady Macduff. I invited her and her brood for a visit to the castle, the very day that I heard of your assault on her hearth. I looked upon her as my single friend in the kingdom at that time. I was terrified when you began to ask about Macduff. When I heard that he had fled the kingdom, I was quite relieved. You never once mentioned his lady or their little ones. I couldn't believe it when I heard the news. Who could conceive of doing such a thing? How many times have I chattered of Lady Macduff and her brood? Why the Macduffs? Oh, why the Macduffs? Why the children? Lady Macduff was sitting beside me. A state banquet? After one of your victories in the wars, a toast was pledged to King Duncan. We clinked our glasses and drank his health. Then Lady Macduff turned to me and spoke of her little son. He asked his father the other day whether our family has royal blood. She set her wine glass down on the table. I think he wants to grow up to be a king. When I was a child, I lost a trinket. It was a little tiny ring. A tinker gave it to my mother, and she gave it to me. This is a fairy's ring, he said. Keep it as close to you as your heart. It will always keep you safe, secure, and warm. People bury treasure and forget where they placed it. Squirrels bury nuts and starve to death. I have buried you, and you have buried me. We skip Macbeth 7, and we go to Lady Macbeth 7, page 106. I I miss laughter and cheerful children, a group of old friends with mulled wine by a winter's fire. All of that ceased when the banquet broke up that night. The old dog is my only companion, and he is not long for this world. He has slept through events that have made my blood run cold. Why ask forgiveness or try to change things? It's how we are seen, not how we see ourselves. Turn around on your horse, you'll find he still goes the same way. I heard laughter in the kitchen the other day. The two pastry cooks froze and stood with their faces dabbed in flour. They were petrified that it would be off with their heads. I offered to help the girl who churns the butter in the courtyard outside the creamery. Her hands were trembling as she tried to show me how it was done. Then her eyes started to twitch, and so I thanked her and turned and walked away. We lost the man who tastes our food. He disappeared sometime in the night. I never told you that I took over that role myself. The wardrobe lady's little girl was bright and cheerful with me the other day. I came across her as she entertained her dolls. So obvious, I kept thinking, that she doesn't know who I am. I see fear in the eyes of the little children. I see it when we ride through the market square. Their parents have taught them all to stand still and not laugh or say a word. Whatever happened to those traveling players? I kept assuring you that I was sure they meant no harm. They had no idea why you grew so angry all at once. I don't know when I'm in touch with my deepest thoughts. When I'm awake, do you think? Or when I'm asleep? I don't know whether it is waking or sleeping that I fear the most. Do you know the boy who fetches the firewood? He brought the hatchet into the hall the other day. I sat with my back to him, waiting for it all to end. I often walk upon the battlements. I lean over the parapet. I watch the activity in the courtyard down below. And skipping Macbeth 8 and going to Lady Macbeth 8, which is chapter 16, the last Lady Macbeth chapter in the novel. So there are two images in her mind, and each take two segments. And here's the first image. I used to watch the ladies weaving the tapestry. The overseer, you recall, was a prickly old man. As the project went on, he grew tired of my concerns. Perhaps it is women's way, perhaps a prerogative of the queen, but I would bring him a new idea almost every day. I would watch the weavers weaving, watch the various colored threads as they wove their way to and fro in this vast design, and they would put their work aside at the end of each day. And the next day, I would ask the master weaver if he would indulge me if I requested a minor change in the design. I'd had a chance to sleep on it, you might say. I thought about what it was that I wanted our new tapestry to portray. Should it end with the day we were wed? Should it end with the day we met? Should most of it be concerned with the days of our youth? The master weaver would throw up his hands. Madame, I realize that you are the queen, but are you the master weaver here, or am I? Well, that's one image in her mind at the end of this duet-duel. Here's the other image in two segments. We were riding through a muddy market town. I've never been good at remembering names. The town was small and the market was not robust. A crowd had gathered, as is always the case in these towns, to watch the royal progress. I could feel the drizzle run down the back of my neck. I was holding with one hand the reins of my horse, and with the other hand I was trying to right the balance of my crown. And there was a lady in the crowd. She was standing amidst her brood, rain and drizzle notwithstanding. She was a queen. And I had a notion, just for a moment, that I should stop the royal train and climb down into the mud and put my crown upon this lady and sweep my robe around her shoulders and bid the footman help her to mount my horse and let this lady take my place as Scotland's queen. And what of me? What would I do? Would I take this lady's place among her brood? But I knew in the midst of this fantasy, queen or not, that there could never be another place for me. And that's the last image, as I mentioned before. Each chapter is about 3,000 words, about 50 images. And these Duet-Duel cycles only have 4 images among 50 in each chapter. And images are, if you think of a pool ball knocking another one out, or a curling rock knocking another out, these images seek to compete, perhaps, knock others out, or illuminate, or work in tandem with other images. So how are these images working amid the many more images of her mind? Now, that was the Duet-Duel, but I'll just leave you with 2 other images in this last chapter of Lady Macbeth's thought in the novel. Page 124. I'm standing on the parapet. I grasp the stones with my toes. I launch myself into the air above the crowd. I float above the bustling courtyard. I float above my blood-soaked babe. I float above the conquerors and the conquered. The sunlight gleams on their blood-soaked armor. I cannot tell which is which from this great height. If I let myself fall from the air, I shall dash my brains out. Well, potential suicide there, but here's another image. This is the final image of Lady Macbeth's thoughts in the entire novel. They are all afraid that I shall commit suicide. That is why the doctor and the gentlewoman keep constant watch. There are dozens of other spies whom my husband keeps in pay. He tells me that all are employed to keep me safe. On the contrary, I say, I shall probably live forever. I shall be queen of the kingdom of Scotland for all of time. Is that not the fate in the adage? The one the children tell when they are let to stay up late and tell hair-curling stories around the fire? You will get your wish of the moment, and then you will be condemned to live that wish on earth every second, every minute, every hour, every day, until the end of time. I will sit on my throne in my empty room and think my thoughts. Thoughts that lead to nothing but more thoughts, and more thoughts, and more thoughts. If only my husband would sit beside me from time to time. And that's the last image for Lady Macbeth in the novel. Here's a passage from my notes. I'll tell you how you can access these notes for free in a moment. We think in imagery. We build, tear down, and rebuild myths. Without doing this, we would not be able to think. At times, we think to our detriment. At times, we think to our gain. The greatest art seems to say that when we think in complex modes, we are better off. And when we think in simplistic modes, we are in danger. However, life is often much more complex than our attempt to create clarifying myths. I'm currently watching the Vietnam War documentary of Ken Burns and Lynn Novick. The simplistic thinking of the Second World War, the enemy's evil and must be destroyed, served humanity well in that war, but was disastrous in the Vietnam War. The complex thinking that was so beneficial in the mind of an Albert Einstein is disastrous in the mind of Hamlet. The one thing about great art is that it will never reduce itself to sloganeering just to gain a little peace of mind. The thing about humans is that we are given the choice of facing both life and great art or diminishing it. To bend and twist life and great art so it yields simple messages of reassurance, or to face life and great art in the way that experience insists that we face them head on, with no false assumptions about their indifference or their ferocity. Amidst that indifference and ferocity, there are positive elements. The havoc of the recent hurricane in Florida and the Caribbean was wide-ranging and devastating. while the stories of human compassion, sacrifice, and survival were local and limited in impact. That to me is the balance of indifference and ferocity on the one hand, and of indications of reassurance on the other hand, in both life and in great art. Well, the novel is Lord and Lady Macbeth. Full of Scorpions is My Mind, a novel by John Passfield. It's available on Amazon. Also available at rocksmillspress.com. That's my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com. And there's information there about the novel as well. If you'd like to access my notes for free, 2 book-length books, a planning notebook, which I write while I'm structuring and writing the novel, and then a journal, which I write while I'm polishing the novel. You can go to johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. That's my website. Click on notebooks, click on journals, go down to the icons. You'll get those book-length notes for free. Lastly, I'd like to repeat a request that I made in 2 other videos. I enjoy reading, but I would love to be able to watch a video in which another person, Lady Macbeth in this case, speaks these same lines. The words are copyright, I wrote them, but I would gladly grant permission, with no money being required, for someone else to read them, as Lady Macbeth, in a video which I can then post. If you're interested, please email me at johnpassfieldnovels, novels with an S, at gmail.com, and we will discuss it. And lastly, thank you for watching this video.